Hello, my name is Marissa, and I'm going to be discussing the long and complicated history of distilled spirits, otherwise known as liquor. To share a little bit about myself, I am a junior in the Human Nutrition program, and I'm minoring in sport and exercise psychology. In my free time, I absolutely love hiking and camping with my boyfriend and my family, and we always have to bring along our dogs. The husky in the top left corner is my boyfriend's puppy, Kato, and the little pit bull on the right is my dog, Cody. To give an overview of the presentation, we are going to start out with distillation and its origins, discuss liquor's journey into America, the era of Prohibition, and we will finish with the history of moonshiners here in West Virginia. Let's begin with the history of distillation. So what is distillation? Distillation is the process of boiling an alcohol-bearing substance like grapes, cereals, or other fruits and vegetables, and collecting the vapor that is produced. Because alcohol boils at a lower temperature than water, the alcohol vaporizes first, and a concentrated alcohol is what's collected. Modern liquor can even be distilled up to 3 times, and each round will produce a more concentrated alcohol than the previous round. Distillation techniques most likely originated in ancient Greece and has ties to the Egyptian alchemist Zosimos. Alchemists used distillation techniques in an attempt to turn substances like mercury, sulfur, and arsenic into gold, also known as alchemy. It was believed that alchemy started as a ritual practice that made an alchemist's soul fiery and therefore closer to heaven. This image is from the early 4th century and is believed to be distilling equipment used by the Egyptian alchemist Zosimos. This equipment design was used all over the world until more advanced designs were created. Since Greeks were the first to use distillation techniques, they were also the first to discover that different substances evaporated at different temperatures. Sailors learned that they could purify drinking water using these techniques, and Europeans even began using distilled wine and herbs for medicine. Distilled wine became known as aqua vitae, which translates to water of life. This is a map of ancient Greece to show where we are, and in the top right corner you can see where this area is located in relation to the rest of the world. So why are distilled liquors referred to as spirits? The word alcohol stems from the Arabic word al-ghal, which refers to an intoxicating spirit that takes over the body. It was believed by many and theorized by Aristotle that people were ingesting a physical spirit when drinking liquor, hence the term spirits. Moving on to liquor in the Americas. Moving into the 17th century, distilleries were beginning to become commercialized all over the world. Beer and wine were still considered safer to drink than water at this time, so the Puritans brought 42 tons of beer and 10,000 gallons of wine with them on the Mayflower, and very little water. The first American distillery was established in present-day Staten Island in 1652. The rum industry was also booming at this time, and in 1733, taxes on rum, sugar, molasses, and tea were imposed. It is theorized that these taxes were the real motivation behind the Boston Tea Party and the American Revolution due to the impacts that they had on alcohol production. These taxes also led to the Whiskey Rebellion of 1794. Alexander Hamilton attempted to lower the state's debt by encouraging the federal government to absorb all the debt from the states and enact a tax on whiskey. Even though the tax wasn't very effective, violence still broke out among the states. A group of distillers from Pennsylvania famously set fire to a tax collector's home, and George Washington had to intervene with his military. The tax was eventually revoked in 1802 because people still refused to pay it, and it was very hard to collect. After the rebellion, the whiskey trade in America was booming. By 1873, there were 4,131 distilleries in America. However, just a few years later, the attitudes towards alcohol began to shift. Moving on to the era of Prohibition. The temperance movement emerged in the late 1890s and gained a large following in the early 1900s. The movement argued that alcohol was behind many moral and societal issues and called for a complete abstinence from alcohol consumption. The movement gained a heavy following from the church, and in 1919, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution prohibited the production and sale of alcohol in America. This era inspired a legendary period of gangsterism, bootlegging, and speakeasies. Prohibition is commonly seen as the birth of organized crime in America, and is even attributed for the formation of the Mafia crime syndicate out of New York City. Speakeasies were extremely common, and those who smuggled alcohol into the country from places like Mexico and Canada became known as bootleggers. These smugglers began making their own alcohol very soon after Prohibition began. Franklin D. Roosevelt permitted the sale of lower alcohol beers and wines when he became president in March of 1933, and he ratified the 21st Amendment on December 5, 1933, to officially end Prohibition. These are some of my favorite images from the era of Prohibition, especially the sign in the top right corner that says "No booze sold here." Since we are in West Virginia, it would be almost a crime to not talk about moonshiners and the history of moonshine and how it came to the Americas. After colonists settled in Jamestown in 1620, corn was very often used to distill spirits. By the 1700s, English, Scottish, German, and Irish distillers settled into the area to avoid paying taxes in their previous countries. These colonists became the first moonshiners in America. These early moonshiners refused to license their distilleries as a way to avoid paying taxes that were enacted during the Revolutionary War. They set up their operations in the Blue Ridge Mountains due to the sparse population and many acres of land. Eventually, police officers and debt collectors caught wind of these illegal operations and began conducting manhunts for these moonshiners. The moonshiners adapted and built underground distilleries that were completely hidden to the naked eye. They would even tie threads around their property to determine if anybody had visited without their knowledge. There is a famous story detailing a distillery that was built underneath a fake cemetery that seemed completely functional. The property was even mowed and planted with flowers the entire time it was up and running, which was assumed to have been for many years by the time it was discovered in 1979. There are many distilleries across the state of West Virginia now, but these are three of my favorites that I have personally visited and highly recommend. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.